Hello and welcome to the show. Now, every year in Africa, we hear about agreements being ratified, etc., etc. However, what we're here to talk about today, over the next hour or so, has been described as a game changer for Africa, the way we conduct business with each other. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. From the 1st of July 2020, this is one of the mechanisms that we will be using to do business, to conduct business with each other. And here to discuss with me over the next hour, which will fly by, I have three expert guests who will actually help us understand what it's all about, because many of us are trying to find out what this means. And to my immediate left, I have Ms. Kumba Jao, who's a Principal State Counsel with the Ministry of Justice and also Executive Secretary at the Alternative Dispute Resolution Secretariat. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And to my further left, I have Mr. Joseph Findinjai, who's the Commissioner of Customs with the Gambia Revenue Authority. And to my right, I have Mr. Lamin Damfa, who's the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Trade, which has a very, very long name to complete it. All of you, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now, I've talked about the name, and the name doesn't really tell us what it's all about. It says, Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Now, amongst other things, it talks about reducing barriers to tariffs, but also there are lots of things to do with dispute resolution and so on. And those are some of the things that we're looking at. Now, if you look at some of the claims that have been made for the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, some of them are quite grand. It is said that once this comes into being, actually trade between African countries, intra-African trade, will rise from 17%, which is quite low, to about 50% and probably more. And it also has been alleged that, there will be trade of up to $70 billion. Now, big figures. So, Mr. Damfa, if I could come to you, if you could just explain to the viewers what this is. I've given them a sort of introduction to it, but please, if you could give us some depth to what the the trade area is all about.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for having us on this show. Africa Continental Free Trade Area is about creating a single market, within Africa, where we will trade among ourselves, with no tariff,
sure.
And also be able to eliminate all the barriers, technical barriers to trade,
Sure.
to ensure that we can be able to relate to each other very well through trade. This decisions was made in 2012, by the head of states, that there is a need to create a free trade area,
Sure.
in Africa, and this is a march towards establishing a common market,
Yes.
for Africa.
Yes.
Then the free trade area, is part of the decision that was made, that what we call the Abuja Treaty.
Sure.
The Abuja Treaty, spells out this intention, at that time, that there is a need to establish a single market, in the African continent,
Sure.
so that we can be able to use trade as an instrument of development.
Sure.
And that is why we have CFTA.
Indeed.
And CFTA was signed last year in
April.
Kigali.
Okay, right. Sorry,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
yes.
in Kigali,
yes.
in
Yes.
2018,
18, yeah.
by 44 countries
Sure.
at the time.
Yes.
And it has now been ratified by 28 countries, that's the member states of
Sure.
AU, which means that today we have 28 state parties,
Sure.
as far as TFTA is concerned. Because to be a state party, you have to be you should sign the CFTA,
Sure.
and also ratify it and deposit your instrument.
That's right. And I think the Gambia did ours in April.
Yes, Gambia did it in April. In
Sure.
fact, Gambia was the 22nd.
That's right. Yes. yes.
Which
yes.
which trigger the start of the CFTA legally,
Sure.
because the agreement says when 22 countries sign,
Sure.
then the agreement will come into effect
correct,
after 30
yes.
days.
That's right.
Then 30th of May,
May.
CFTA effectively came into operation.
Indeed, right.
Then, but the operational phase of CFTA
Yes.
was launched
Yes.
this year in 1st of July
Indeed, yeah.
by the head of states in Niamey.
That's right.
And this was well attended. And why we call it a game changer is that because if you look at trade among African countries, it's very, very limited.
It's poor.
Then we are trading more with the outsiders than we are trading
with each other.
With each other.
Sure.
And that has, has not helped us.
Sure.
And then with this realization, the head of states came together and said, we have to challenge ourselves.
Sure.
We have to increase intra-Africa trade.
Sure.
How do we do that? We must create this single market, with rules that's going to govern trading within this single market.
Let me pause you there, if I could come, because we're talking about, amongst other things, Commissioner, we're talking about removal of tariffs and so on. In terms of, if anybody's listening to this, we said, okay, the Gambia signed this in April and became the 22nd country to ratify. How prepared are we in terms of our tariffs and that are already in existence in order to review them and also do away with them so that come 1st of July 2020, as is intended, we're ready to trade with the rest of Africa?
That's a good question, because we are still negotiating our tariffs.
Sure.
Most of the other customs procedures like trade facilitation, custom procedures have all been done. We have negotiated. But the tariff is a huge, huge component when it comes to trade. Not only the dismantling of the barriers, but before you dismantle the barriers, you have to look at your tariffs and see what is being produced within Africa.
Sure.
Because you don't want to have a tariff where people would cease to have certain goods or certain necessities that they are used to. So you must have to see what is produced in Africa, in the agricultural sector, in the mining, handicraft, animal husbandry, all these things, and then you look at our manufacturing base, which I think it still needs to be worked on, because most of us, like in West Africa here, the leading manufacturing countries are the Ivory Coast, Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal. They are the leading ones. And still, you would see even the trade within West Africa is not more than 24%. So, and we in West Africa already have a customs union. That means we have gone from a free trade, and now we are using the same tariff. If you pay 5% for this bottle of water in Gambia, it's the same 5% rate of duty you pay in Senegal and you pay in Nigeria.
Okay, so we're getting there.
Yeah, so this is what the AFCFTA is looking at. But the basis of the tariff have to be done. The thresholds have to be done to say on what level you should charge and lower or higher. This has to be done. And also we also need to look at where our power is, like in agricultural produce. And then the agricultural produce will be free within ourselves when we trade within ourselves. But we will work it out in a way that outside the third parties, when they come in with their goods, they would have to pay, so that our produce also will be able to trade. And then when it comes to the industry, we will also have to certify the industries that are in those countries that are really manufacturing. Yes, not just only opening a packaging plant.
All right. Now, we will touch on different things as we go. And if I could ask Ms. Kumba Jao, we're talking about trade. We're talking about sort of equitable trade. We're talking about sort of equality. But the fact is, Gambia is not as big as many countries or any country in Africa. When it comes to inevitably, sometimes in trade, there are disputes. What are the mechanisms to actually resolving some of those disputes? I mean, we'll come back to other things as well, but I thought, as we've mentioned about power and we've mentioned about, equalizing certain things, I'm assuming that there are rules that everybody has to sign up to be bound by.
That's right. Thank you, Ade. There is the dispute settlement mechanism, and it serves as a means of security and predictability to the regional trading system. And also state parties recognize that it will help them to preserve their rights under the agreement. Because it's good to say, yes, there is an agreement, but then what happens if there's a problem? Yeah. What happens if there's a particular country that's refusing to comply? And that's where the dispute settlement mechanism comes in. And it's very, very important in this agreement. It's a very important part. And it helps member states to be able to, if they have a particular dispute with another member state, to take it to the dispute settlement body, which will sort it out. They will set up a panel, and that can look into the matter.
That was part of what I was trying to get to, because I think when something like this is set up, when the African Union, transformed from being an Organization of African Unity, you had a headquarters, you had a secretariat, and so on. Is it planned that, around the free trade area, we're going to have a secretariat? And I guess I could come to you for that. And if so, is that the case, and where will it be?
Ghana.
In Ghana.
Ghana is the secretariat is in Ghana.
Chosen? I mean, how was Ghana chosen?
No, it's chosen through a competitive bidding, just like in any of the AU institutions.
Sure.
When you are hosting an AU institution, there is a process that you go through, that each member states bid for it, that those who are interested. In fact, when the bidding started, it was 7 countries. Sure. It came down to 5. In fact, Ghana and Nigeria, Ghana and Senegal, both countries applied.
Right.
But because they are both within ECOWAS, and ECOWAS, want to be the host. Right. Then what they did was to negotiate, to ensure that only one country applied from ECOWAS. And Senegal withdrew, and Ghana continued with the bid. Unfortunately, Ghana won it. Then is going to be in Accra. In fact, it's already been established. The headquarter agreement should be signed by now. But that was the last directive from the Council of Ministers. Yes.
I mean, when I was sort of preparing to do this program, there are a couple of things I noted. I said, if we're serious, the success of Africa's regeneration will greatly depend on successful regional integration, which I guess this is what this is about. But also, one of the other notes I made is that we're talking about regional integration across the whole African continent. And if you look at some of the ambitions of the free trade area, it talks about, not just increasing jobs and so on. It talks about investment. It talks about the boost that there will be to infrastructure. Yeah. Now, I move around the Gambia, and I'm challenged just getting around the city, or challenged in getting from village to village or from town to town because of poor infrastructure. If we can't even get around our own country, how are we meant to transact with the rest of Africa? So what are the mechanisms to actually make this more than just a pipe dream and make it a reality? I mean, what are the plans?
Yeah, no, you have to understand that this infrastructural deficit is well recognized. Sure. And that is why, if you look at AU Agenda 2063, there are a number of flagship projects. Sure. And this is one of them. And we have countries that has been designated as champion. Sure. Then champions for infrastructure, that is South Africa. Sure. That's South African government. Sure. Just like champion for anti-corruption is Nigeria. Then you have things like that. Sure. And this is because the African head of states recognize this deficit, sure, and they know, without dealing, this deficit, they will not be able to increase intra-African trade, sure, the way we wanted, sure, because you cannot trade when you cannot move around, yeah, and you cannot trade when people cannot move around, and find it difficult to move around, and goods also. And if you look at trade in Africa, it's mainly on the road.
Yes. Yeah.
Then exactly. And now, if you cannot move from point A to point B, that would be difficult.
Indeed,
and this is why there are programs to address the infrastructural deficit. Sure. Not only road, but even energy.
Indeed.
Yes, energy, because one of the objectives of CFTA is to industrialize the African continent.
Well, I read it, and it said sustainable industrialization.
Yes.
So yes, I mean this is
because the issue is that we want to move out of the commodity economy to a manufacturing economy.
Indeed.
And if you want to do that, you must be able to address this infrastructural deficit, both road and also energy.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Now, when we talk about these, what I call sort of grand plans, we're also talking about sustainable development goals, and please feel free to sort of join in, and whoever wishes to take this, because we're talking about creating jobs, creating sustainable jobs, but also we're talking about the statistic that was bandied around was that in 2018, 90% of the jobs created globally were from MEs, micro, small, medium enterprise. I mean, do we get the sense that we in the Gambia are actually creating enough of those jobs in order to businesses to create those sorts of jobs in order for us to sort of start trading? I mean, is that happening in the Gambia?
Yes, it's not at a level that we would want to see.
Sure.
Yes, but if you look at, because we've done the MSME mapping, that's micro, small, and medium enterprises, and we realized that about 99% of the businesses in the Gambia are micro, which means that they are very small, and many of these enterprises are outside the formal economy, and which means that their contribution is not captured in the GDP calculation. Then a lot of their contribution is outside. Then the reason why we did this, well, this is the second time the ministry have conducted such an exercise, is to understand the landscape, and also be able to come up with policies that will help us to be able to respond to the challenges that this sector is facing. And after the mapping, we've developed an MSME, we update our national MSME policy to be able to respond to those challenges. And we also are working on a program to see how do we formalize this huge business sector, so that it becomes part of the economy, so that they can be able to benefit from government support. They can also be able to benefit from the donor support in terms of the services that they would require to grow. And also to be able to contribute to the national development.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, Commissioner, if I can come to you, I mean, when I was reading about rules of origin. Some things coming through customs, whichever way is coming into the country. How does one verify where this has originated from, in order that the countries that have the economic muscle, economic power, don't take advantage of those that have less? How do we verify? What are the rules around that, the rules of origin?
Yes, with the rules of origin, you must have a basis. Like as I was saying, there must be tariff thresholds, and then you must know what is the manufacturing base of the whole of the countries that are part of the AFCFTA, and then you must do mechanisms of getting customs to verify with trade on where these factories are and the countries that they are, and whether actually manufacturing is taking place. But apart from that, rules of origin in this modern day is very complex, because factories tend to outsource most of the time. So sometimes it's not where only it is originating from, where you have the origin criteria. Because I can be here, let's say I am doing a computer. I have a hardboard from America. I have my diodes and my ICs from China. So what rules of origin will look at is the last country of manufacturing.
I mean, are we going to be using things like barcodes and so on to say, to kind of say this barcode means...
The barcodes and all these things, the barcodes are ISOs, International Standardization Organization. They will deal more with standards and maybe intellectual property rights and things like that. And
yeah,
then you would know that this was patented by Kumba or this was patented by Ade, and he's in that country and that. But then when you come to do the whole component in the Gambia, then you, the manufacturer, are the only one who knows, apart from the customs where it is passing from. Yes. We will also, there is also an added value, because you will have 100% origin of the goods, meaning if it is agriculture, they are grown in the Gambia, so it's an African produce. You will have 60%, which means semi-manufactured, and then the rest is done. Let's say garments. So I get the textiles from Ghana, then I come here and I do the shirts, the suits, and everything. 60% of it is being done in the Gambia. Or maybe I get it from China, and then I bring it in, and then I start to prepare the dress, or the shirt, or the trouser.
If I could just
so we must have to know exactly what and what is coming from where and how. Then you have the added value, which is 33%, or in some cases 31% of the added value should be originating from the African state.
Okay, so these have all been agreed upon.
Now we are
negotiating.
We are negotiating on to have a hybrid rule of origin, where we have specific rules of origin, and we also have the value-added rules of origin. Yes.
Okay. Thanks for that. The reason I wanted to pick up on something you've just mentioned there, about the sort of hybridity and also the percentages. And if I could come to you again, Kumba, we talk about, 33% and X% and so on. Throughout the year, myself at this TV channel, we've been covering workshops where people have been sort of interrogating what this means. And I just wondered whether in the sort of scenarios that people have gone through, including dispute resolution, are these some of the things that have been looked at? And I just wondered whether you can give us an example of what might be the type of thing that would have been looked at that could have then been resolved. So from the start of the dispute, it's over whether this smartphone contains 33% of the components from a particular country and so on, or if not, what are some of the scenarios that have been looked at around dispute resolution?
Mainly, member states can disagree on many fronts. For example, Gambia can be saying, we want to take our granules into Guinea, and then Guinea will say, customs will query a lot of things. And then Gambia saying, okay, we've got our trucks of granules waiting to enter Guinea, and there's a problem. We are worried that they will get rotten or they will be spoiled or something, and Guinea is not complying. There, Gambia can invoke this mechanism, which is the dispute settlement mechanism. They have to lodge a complaint with the dispute settlement body. Ideally, they encourage arbitration. They encourage mediation. They would ideally want Gambia and Guinea to sit and talk about it before they do set up a panel. So it could be various issues. It could be anything. Guinea could be not complying with various other things. It's not only with tariffs or whatever. But what happens is once they approach the dispute settlement body, they can say, okay, we want to go for mediation. And then they will put a halt to it. But once you invoke that mechanism, what they don't want is for you to do forum shopping. So you cannot invoke any other mechanism. You will have to go through with whatever you started. You cannot go halfway and then it's not working for you and then
you
stop.
Go switch.
So the dispute settlement body will, after a meeting, set up a panel. We have panelists from various member states. They keep a roster of panelists from different member states. Member states can nominate their own panelists, and they will choose which panelists will sit. Now, for example, if there is a dispute involving a particular member state, for example, a dispute involving Gambia, you cannot have a panelist that is Gambian, unless the state parties agree, specifically agree. The reason being, well, we when we were writing this mechanism, we did really argue, we should completely exclude members, nationals of a particular member state. Sure. But then we said, what if we only have the experts?
Yeah, well, I was going to say
that is going to be Gambian. Quite. But this have to be specifically agreed by the two state parties that to the dispute. Okay, there can be also third parties that can join a particular dispute, but they have to demonstrate substantial interest in the dispute. Okay. For example, if I give you a scenario where Gambia and let's say Togo have a problem, and then Senegal think this might be of interest to them because they do have a similar problem with Mali, they can join, but they have to demonstrate substantial interest, and then the parties will agree to the dispute. Now, when the panel is set up, they will look into the matter. They will hear oral submissions and written submissions as well before they write an interim report, which they will give to the dispute settlement body. And once that report is circulated, the relevant state parties can now make comments. And those comments will be taken on board before they issue the final report to the dispute settlement body. And obviously the findings of the dispute settlement panel can be appealed. I
was going to say there must be an appeal process and then final method where you can't go beyond a certain point. Otherwise you'll be forever appealing.
That's right. There is an appellate body. There's an appellate body of 7, but three member states, panelists will sit on that appellate body. Just 3 at a time, at one given time. And as I said the first time, we would try to avoid a panelist who is from that particular member state, unless they've got expertise. They are chosen on the basis of their objectivity, obviously, their reliability, accountability, and all that. But we do try to avoid member states, nationals of member states. And once they look, they will follow the same procedure as the dispute settlement panel at the initial stage. They will hear oral submissions and written submissions, and they can also approach any other member states to get more information. They can instruct experts as well. So experts who can enlighten them. Exactly. And once they deliberate, their deliberations are confidential, and they will not allow parties to be present or anybody else. And whatever opinions that are expressed in those in the discussions, they don't say this particular panelist said this. Obviously,
so it's anonymized.
Yes, it's anonymous. It's anonymous. And at the appeal stage, that is the final stage. Unless the dispute settlement body decide we are not going to adopt the report of the appellate body. So that still gets it can be ruled over by the dispute settlement body. We think, after consulting, they think, okay, we don't want to adopt the report of the appellate body.
Okay, so the reason I was asking is because I wanted to find out the sort of the binding nature of the fact that you've agreed to start the process with this, and you don't then say, well, I don't like what's been decided here, I'm going to go to an international body. So that is taken care of.
That is taken care of. They want to avoid forum shopping.
Indeed.
Because obviously people can, member states can say, okay, this is not working for me, let me go to another mechanism and invoke another mechanism. You cannot do that.
You can't do that. Good. Okay, thanks for that. Now,
sorry, let me just
highlight
some of the things that Mr.
Commissioner said
mentioned in terms of the rules of origin. You know, what he said about manufacturing, you have a lot of outsourcing. Yeah, but what you look at when you have to determine the origin of a product is where the substantial transformation has taken place. Then you have to look at that. And also, in fact, rules of origin is one of the areas where negotiation is still on. It's about 90% of negotiations on rules of origin that has been completed. Then 10% is still outstanding. And we are looking at not only the general rules of origin, but we're also looking at product specific. You know, because products are different.
Of course.
You know, then you have criteria that looked at product specific rules of origin. You know, and you will see there's different thresholds. In some cases, you'll have 50%.
Sure.
In some cases, you will go up to about 60%.
Sure.
In some cases, you go 55, 65 and things like that,
Okay.
depending on the product. And we still have some product that are still controversial. For example, fisheries product.
Right.
How do you determine the rules of origins of fish?
Yeah.
And
Things are like that.
And fish is also going along with vessels.
Yes.
Right. Yes.
You cannot treat fish without treating the vessels.
Yes.
Right.
Because we are also looking at having 50%
Right.
of a foreign vessel, if it is shipping in Africa,
Right.
to have 50% of the indigenous of Africa.
Right.
And if it is registered in
Okay.
Gambia and it's going with a Gambian flag,
Yes.
at least 50% of those should be Gambian.
Okay, because one of the
They're
reasons,
still in
yes.
negotiation.
Sure.
And then also, then the fish.
Right.
Also now you have factory ships.
Uh-huh. Yes.
You have
exactly.
factory ships
Yes.
where the trawlers will ship
Yes.
and then pump it
Yes.
to another
To another
ship,
yeah.
where then you have a full factory layout.
Right.
And they will take it, clean it, fill it, pack it,
Sure.
or freeze it, or do whatever, and even putting them in cans,
Right. Yes.
like tuna, boiling it, and then packing it in cans,
quite.
as chunks
Yes.
or flake tunas,
Yes.
and then exporting it.
Yes.
What he said about the transformation is true, and also the last country
Yes.
where the manufacturing basis
It's
also
special.
has to be looked at.
Okay.
Okay, so when you look at transformation, you see, oh, Gambia has done 60%, but it's being packed in Senegal, but they are doing it to 20%, then you say the origin is Gambia, obviously.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
And why we are using product specific? Because countries that are already huge in manufacturing,
Yes.
like South Africa,
Yeah, quite.
like Egypt,
Yeah.
they are already using
They've
product
had-
specific
Yeah.
rules of origin.
Right.
But we who have a smaller industrial base,
Yeah.
we have to use value added so that our guys also can be part of it. So that's why we are looking for a hybrid, where we'll also have product specific and also have value added.
I mean, one of the reasons
Yes.
I was asking, particularly around the sort of fisheries and so on, we all know that for many years you have vessels at sea being referred to as Liberian registered tankers.
Flaxseed,
Well, they got nothing to do with Liberia in reality. Those vessels can come and fish in our waters or any other waters. I mean, I guess, but the point you made about at least 50% of the staff, have to be from...
Yes, it's because Liberia is cheap in registration
course,
of ships.
Yes.
It's just like when you say Cyprus.
Yeah, quite Greece.
You see
and
a lot of ships
quite.
are saying on the day
Cyprus
Cyprus
registered.
Limassol.
Yeah, quite.
All those Limassol are in Cyprus, and then it's because the flag is cheap to
Quite.
run.
Quite.
Yes.
Yes. So those are some of the things. Now, anybody watching this will be thinking, okay, in order for the Gambia to actually benefit from this, we will surely have to diversify our produce, because what we produce, lots of other African countries already produce. So how are we going to diversify enough of an industry and create a manufacturing base that we will have products that we can actually sell to the rest of Africa? We talk about groundnuts. There are several countries in Africa that already grow groundnuts. Why would they want Gambian ones? So in terms of diversification, do you see this happening enough? And also, I wanted to, before you, just to kind of support that, the reason I ask this is because I think if we diversify, it might be in actually being a country to which other countries can outsource. And that was why I was interested in the whole rules of origin element of it. But, to go to the point of diversification, do you see enough of it? And also, what do you see that we should be sort of heading towards, really?
Diversification is a process. And we must begin the process of diversification, looking at the structure of our economy. How do we embark on the structural change to ensure that we look at sectors where we can, we have comparative advantage. Many will argue that where Gambia would have a comparative advantage is services. And trade in services is also part of this agreement. Because if you look at CFTA, there are three main protocols, you know, in the first phase of the agreement.
And these are?
This is trade in goods. That's a protocol on trade in goods.
Yeah.
Protocol on trade in services,
Yeah.
and dispute settlement mechanism. These are the three protocols.
Okay.
Yes. We will also have a protocol on investment, intellectual property right, and competition policy.
Sure.
You know, because all these are elements that, you know, that are required to be able to consolidate a free trade area.
Sure.
You know, and what we call the third, the other elements, we call them second phase.
Sure.
You know, yeah. Then you look at because a lot of studies that's, you know, that came out recently, you know, looking at the Gambian economy, is one of the areas where we can benefit is tourism. Yeah, of course. You know, because it's allowed free movements, you know, of goods and persons. Yeah. You know, the tourism industry will tell you, if you have tourists here, they want to move to Senegal, it's a challenge. Yeah, but with CFTA, that shouldn't be there. You know, then which means that we have the opportunity to expand our tourism sector, you know, which is very good. And also we have the opportunity also to expand our financial sector. Right. You know, Gambia could be a financial center to support, you know, manufacturing in other part of West Africa and Africa and the rest of Africa as well. You know, these are areas that we can we can. But this does not necessarily mean that we still cannot go into manufacturing. Because now you have an enlarged market of 1.2 billion people. Indeed. Then the size of your market is no longer your population, you know, but for the whole entire continent. Sure. You know, and that gives us an opportunity, you know, to be able to invest in the manufacturing sector, you know, and in that case, what we required, as you mentioned earlier, we have to address the issue of energy. Of course. We have to address the issue of infrastructure, that is road, you know, road network, you know, and so many other things like, you know, human resources. Sure. But human resources is very critical, you know, in terms of power in manufacturing sector, because you will need a required skill, you know, the critical skills that is required, you know, must be there so that you can be able to attract investment in the manufacturing sector, I mean, even in the services. Yeah. I
mean, part of the reason I asked the question is because when I was reading through, I didn't get a sense, and maybe, you know, when we attended the workshop, I would have liked to have seen, you know, when we covered them for QTV, I would have liked to have seen more emphasis on education for skills that are needed in the 21st century. Yes. So that we can be a market to which, you know, things can be outsourced. And I didn't get the sense that that was happening. And I just wondered whether, you know, there was a kind of push and so on to actually help, you know, businesses think, you know, about interjecting with universities and so on and saying, you know, these are the skills we're going to need come the 1st of July next year, and so on, try and steer students towards those sorts of industries and those sorts of jobs, and of course stimulate, you know, entrepreneurship. But as I say, I don't get the sense that that is happening, but perhaps it is. I mean, if we look at, again, it's not that I'm obsessed with dispute resolutions.
No, even before you go to dispute, before you go to the dispute, as MPS was telling you, yes, they have this given championship to certain presidents, not because of some of them, not because they are capable, but some of them is because of the deficiency. And because of the deficiency, they have seen their drive that they would want to be, they want to be capable.
So who are some of these champions?
Niger. Niger is champion in the whole FCFTA.
I saw.
Because Niger is landlocked and does not have that much business going on. And it uses all these other countries to get out.
Because I was intrigued when I saw President of Niger.
Even if you have gone to Niger like 5 years back, even the ability of hotels of certain standard were in scarcity. But now with the meetings going on, you see now they even have a Radisson Blue in Niger. So that means that they are recognizing that they need to even do something
Sure.
to develop.
Okay.
And that is also where we also are looking at, even in our manufacturing base, not only that we are small, but we also need to standardize
Yes, quite.
and have correct standards and manufacture things that are very, very good so that they can compete in the sub-region.
Which is exactly the point I was, funny enough, coming to, which was that there must be some sort of mechanism whereby we're trying to sell to another country and they're saying that, oh, we're not taking it from Gambia because it's inferior. Is there a body that arbitrates as to actually know this is of a certain quality, and how is that going to actually work in a practical sense, whereby, you know, we demand a certain quality in order to export or sell beyond our own borders, which is what happens now.
Yes, it's the same dispute settlement body.
Right.
When you take your dispute there, you take the problem.
Sure.
They, as I said, they can hire experts.
Sure.
They can hire experts who can advise them. They can also get information from other member states,
Sure.
wherever they can get the information just to arrive at a very good decision.
Sure.
They are allowed to do that. So they can get an expert who can advise them with regards to that particular issue.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, good.
In
Thank
fact,
you for
I
that.
think,
Yes.
no, some of those things, before you get to dispute level, you know, it will take
It'll
time
be
because the issue is you have a number of committees.
Sure.
You know, when you looked at the standardization, you have because normally what people use standards for becomes NTB, the non-tariff barriers.
Yes.
They have a committee
Sure.
on non-tariff barriers. You have SPS committee. You know, these are all part of trade
Sure.
committees.
Sure.
You know, that will be looking at issues that relate to this kind of issues that during the trading period.
Sure.
Like if you have because there is an NTB committee.
Right.
In fact, this is they've developed a sort of a software where countries will be linked to each other.
Right.
They have each and every country will have a focal point.
Right.
Then if you have an issue relating to NTB issues, then you use that portal and report your country case. Then when you send a report to this portal, the whole CFTA member states, you know, the focal points, they will receive the message immediately, and the secretariat will receive the message, you know, then so that there will be an action immediately to be able to address that.
Yeah.
Then where those commit at that level, you cannot solve, you know, an NTB problem, you know, then it will escalate to a senior trade official level, to a council, you know, before it get to the dispute. You know, then all these mechanisms exist, you know, all this arrangement exists to ensure that, you know, because we all know that the dispute mechanism, you know, may take time,
of course,
you know, to come to a decision.
Sure.
Then how do we deal with the case relating to trade? Because you're talking about people's investment, you know, people's livelihood. You know, sometimes we have cases that are leading to a commodity that is pressable. Then how do you resolve that? And then this is why some of these committees are established, so that there could be a rapid response when there is a problem, to be able to resolve, you know, whatever issues is found on the ground.
Sure.
Yes.
Now,
but even just to add to that, even if it is escalated to the dispute settlement level, there are various ways to treat problems, issues. For example, if it is something involving perishable goods, the timelines are shorter.
Of course.
Because normally they would say from the time you raise a dispute to the end period, they would give you normally 60 days. The panel is normally supposed to give a report, a final report to the dispute settlement body within 60 days. Now, if they cannot, they have to put their reasons in writing to the dispute settlement body and say, we cannot produce this report within the 60 days, but there is a maximum of 90 days. Now, with regards to perishable goods, there is a maximum of 1.5 months. You cannot exceed that. You have to really come to a very rapid decision because the perishable goods are waiting, and of course, yes.
Okay. Well, thanks for that.
Yes.
Now,
as PS was saying, some of these NTBs and TBTs,
I think you better explain to our viewers what non-tariff barriers and
technical barriers to trade.
Yes.
Because of certain laws we put in to protect the trade within our countries.
Yes.
Okay, like for example, you said granules. Okay, now that the national food processing, it's starting to export maybe to the EU or to China, and then they realize that the quality, we had a history of aflatoxin and things like that, but they have eradicated it by bringing the anti-flux and giving it to farmers to put on the ground, and then but someone somewhere out there might still want to use that barrier and say, oh, this Gambian granule, it has aflatoxin, without even testing it.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure.
So this could happen, and when it happens, then you have to apply quality safety, like health or Standard Bureau. So the Standard Bureau already in the Gambia is working with the Food Safety and Quality Authority, and they are building standards, international standards on certain commodities.
Sure.
So by the time they finish on agricultural and food produce, they would then start to go to manufacturing. And then our manufacturers will also know the standards required for certain products to be produced.
Okay, great.
In fact, if you look at trade in Africa, tariff is not the major issue.
Right. What is the major issue?
It's the NTB, non-tariff
barriers. Yes.
You know, you find a lot of how do you call it, roadblocks on the road. You know, a lot of extortions. You know, a lot of deliberate closure of borders. You know, then these are the main issues that are affecting trade. I think studies have shown that the impact of NTBs on trade is so greater that removing it, you know, could easily, you know, increase the intra-Africa trade.
Yes,
but that is the main barrier
to
intra-Africa trade.
All right. Now we're talking about intra-Africa trade. I'm at home, I'm a Gambian business, and I'm watching this program. And the first thing that I will ask is, how will this impact me? Can you give me a sense of how we are preparing Gambian businesses to be ready for what seems to be a quite amazing and great opportunity? I mean, are there outreach talks and seminars and focus groups and workshops? How are we preparing businesses to take advantage of what seems to be an unbelievable opportunity? We're talking about 1st of July next year. It's not that far away.
This is one of them that we are doing now.
Indeed.
Engaging the business community to understand issues relating to CFTA. You know, we've done a number of workshops with them. You know, a number of consultations, you know, with them, and we hope to continue this engagement. And we are not limiting it here. In fact, we will be embarking on a regional consultation throughout the country. You know, we'll also be using community radios, you know, so that those businesses outside the Greater Banjul area will also have the opportunity to understand, you know, what is CFTA and what does CFTA stands for, what are the benefits from CFTA, and also what are the likely challenges that, you know, that may emanate from the implementation of CFTA on their businesses.
Of course,
you know, because you also have to expect that, you know, the competition will not be, you know, as it is now, you know, because you will have, it means that if you open your markets to the rest of Africa, then there will be an intense competition. You know, as much as you also want to export to other countries, there are other countries, the businesses also want to export to your market. Then you should be prepared for the competition. You know, but the end game is that, you know, if you are competitive, you know, you have a larger market to serve. Then you have a likelihood, you know, to survive for another 100 years if you remain being competitive.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Now, if I could come to you, Commissioner, we're talking about, you know, moving goods, moving services, but particularly moving goods. People always complain about the fact that, you know, there are fees they have to pay to just move from this port to that port, or, you know, from this airport to that airport. I'm assuming that once this comes into being, we're actually going to have sort of different fees that would apply if it was Africa to Africa, as opposed to the rest of the world, to Africa? And will these be clearly spelled out in each case as to what they are? So there's clarity, because it's one of the things that people always complain about, that there isn't clarity. You take something one week, you get charged something else. You take it another week, or your friend takes the same thing and they get charged something different. The standardization that we've been talking about, is this also going to apply in that particular sphere?
Yes, there will be standardization, and there is even standardization at present because the rates of duty are the same.
Yes.
If you have garments, your suit is 20%, my suit is also paying 20%.
Right.
But where is your suit coming from?
Right.
It might be coming from UK.
Mm-hmm.
And then the labor cost in UK is higher than the labor cost in South Africa,
Sure.
or the labor cost in China. So you and I cannot pay the same amount.
Indeed.
Because you might be having yours as £50 on wholesale, whilst I am having mine for 50 rands.
Quite. Yes.
So my 50 rand is almost 20 pounds.
Yeah.
So when I pay my 20%, I am paying for £4.
Yeah.
But your 20%, you are paying, how to call it? You are paying what? 25 pounds.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that will be the difference that is there.
Yeah, of course.
But apart from that, Africa to Africa,
Yes.
the import duties will be out, just like we have now. The ECOWAS
Sure.
import duty is out
Mhm.
for goods that are manufactured and goods that are grown,
Sure.
agriculture, animal husbandry, mines, crafts, all is duty free.
Okay.
But if you are bringing it from a third party, which is a country that is not part of the agreement,
Okay.
then you pay the duties that
Okay.
are applying now.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Apart from that, we have our shortfalls within our ECOWAS agreement. That is, we don't have Kumba there. We don't have the dispute
Sure.
settlement mechanism.
Sure.
So right now we have a problem way in the border with Benin and Nigeria.
Sure.
It's been a border closure for almost a month now,
Yeah, of course.
and it has started to affect us.
Right.
Yesterday I was talking to my officer, last week rather, I was talking to my officer in Basse, who had a certain company
Sure.
had paid in advance
Sure.
for a commodity that they were sure that it will arrive in October. So the duties were calculated,
Mhm.
invoices were given to them.
Right.
It's a compliant company, and they know that the figures they are giving is right.
Correct.
So
yes.
they charge them duty, and they paid beforehand.
Yeah.
So they paid beforehand. The goods
Because
are still at the Senegal
Sure.
border as we speak,
Yes.
because they were coming that other way, and they took the route
yeah.
from between Nigeria
Nigeria and Benin.
and Benin,
Yeah.
and it was stuck there.
Right.
It was stuck there all the time for a month. So the businesses would like to pay taxes,
Yeah.
but they would not like delays like that.
No, quite.
They would want to see that there is free movement.
Sure.
And as he was saying, all these problems are not tariff, but the non-tariff barriers
Sure.
that are the TBTs, technical barriers to trade.
Great. Now,
So because Nigeria was saying that they have a problem
yes.
with medicines,
Right.
fake drugs coming in,
Yes, indeed.
and then they went to close the border
yes.
instead of trying to see how
they
best to
could
cope
reason.
with.
Yeah.
Okay, when they did it, it reduced, but then they stopped other businesses from
Sure.
doing business that we are
Okay.
not doing medicine.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you for that. We're nearly getting towards the end of it. And so what I'd like to do is, if I could ask you all in turn, what would success look like in terms of this free trade area coming into being? What would you consider to be success, say 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line? If I could start with you, Lamin Damfa.
The success would be how best we are able to expand our business
Sure.
by using CFTA as a conduit,
Okay.
because that is important.
Sure.
Because if you look at the Gambia, it's 2 million population.
Indeed.
You know, it's not a viable market.
Yeah.
You know, then if now our businesses that doesn't have economies of scale,
Sure.
they have the opportunity to enjoy that.
Sure.
You know, if you are exporting, you can export to 1.2 billion people.
Go ahead.
You know, beyond the 300 million that we are talking about as part of
Okay.
ECOWAS market.
Sure.
And the other one is, I think, the other one is the dispute settlement mechanism
Sure.
that we've never enjoyed that in ECOWAS.
Sure.
And this CFTA brings about that. Okay. Now, if CFTA,
I must give your otherwise we're going to run out of time.
Yes, just
we will run out
of
time. Sorry.
That in terms of the frequent border clauses that we are experiencing,
sure.
If the CFTA comes into effect,
sure.
That is likely to be the thing of the past.
Okay. Sure.
The business will not be affected by that.
All right. Well, I don't know whether he's still in your line about the dispute.
I can just add that.
Please,
yes,
quickly.
He's very right. The dispute settlement mechanism is one of the beauties of this CFTA,
of course,
because it serves to recognize or preserve the obligations and rights of state parties.
Indeed.
And it helps with accountability.
Sure.
So it is really what we were not enjoying with ECOWAS is what we will hopefully enjoy with this CFTA coming in.
Okay. Commissioner,
yes.
30 seconds,
it
I'm
means
afraid.
hard work.
Okay.
But right now we have problem with transporting on ship from Nigeria to Gambia. You have to go all the way to Europe and then come back.
Okay.
So we need to do something on transportation and financing.
And on that note, I think we have to end it. Thank you for watching, and I must thank my guests. To my immediate left, Ms. Kumba Jao from, yes, thank you. Commissioner Njai, thank you. And Mr. Lamin Damfa, thank you. And I hope you've learned a lot about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. I certainly have learned a lot. And we hope this will be the first of many programs where we educate each other about what is to come. 1st of July 2020, this, we have said, is a game changer for Africa, and we hope it will be so. Thank you for watching.